Good morning, everyone. Welcome on this very chilly Wednesday morning to this wonderful webinar all about helping you navigate financial changes in your business. I'm Anna from the Small Business Britain team, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Lisa Conway-Hughes from LCH Wealth, otherwise known as Miss Lolly online, and Zoey Hughes, who is a strategy and growth expert. I will hand over to them in probably less than 2 minutes, but I just run through a few things before we start. We're so delighted today to be supported by the wonderful Lloyds Bank Academy. You'll see a QR code on screen if you want to take a look at other support that they offer. So thank you so much to Lloyds Bank Academy for supporting this webinar series with us. This webinar is being recorded, so please do watch it back if you like. Some of you will be watching it on record now, so welcome if you are. And that's just to make sure that all that we offer at Small Business Britain is accessible as possible. We know you're very busy people, so watching it back is always important to us. Please do use the chat as well to introduce yourself, ask questions throughout. I know you've sent questions ahead of time, which Lisa and Zoe will be answering for you today. But please do, if you think of any more through the session, we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So please do ask any more. I was going to say something else, and I always forget something to say at the beginning of the webinar. But I think without further ado, I will hand over to, no, that's what I was going to say, mentoring. If you've come along today, you will get 2 hours of free mentoring. So please do keep an eye out for a link that you will receive tomorrow as part of your replay. So keep an eye out for that. It's a wonderful opportunity to have some free mentoring on us. I will now hand over to Lisa and Zoe to introduce themselves fully and get started with the questions.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you again, second week on the bounce. In case you don't know what we do, so I'm a financial advisor, so there'll be things that I can talk about and things that we're not able to talk about. So I'll do my best with all the questions. And then I'm joined today by Zoe. So I don't know if you want to talk about your area of expertise.
Sure. First time on a Small Business Britain webinar, but I have been loitering for some time, and I've done quite a lot of mentoring through the various programs over the years. I offer a wide range of business support services to solopreneurs and small teams in the UK and internationally as well. A combination of strategic support, online business management, and all sorts of different things across different industries.
Well, the first question we got given was, so all about financial challenges, obviously, but what are the first steps I should take when I'm experiencing cash flow issues? And I'll pass to you in a second, Zoe, because I think we probably could tag team this one well. But my first thoughts were, number one, speak to your accountant. If you're worrying about future cash flow, I think it's speaking to your accountant, really getting ahead for those numbers and looking at where does the pain lie? Is it 6 weeks away? Is it 3 months away? Is it this time next year? Really understanding that. And then I think it's about looking at your pipeline. So what money's owed to you? What money can you pull in to help alleviate that problem? But also what money's in your pipeline that maybe you're holding it up. So in my world of financial advice, it could be we haven't quite got all the paperwork ready for the client to sign, which would hold up us being paid. So I think it's looking at that part of the pipeline, and then the pipeline, which could be future business. What can you do to drive more leads and therefore more business into that pipeline before you start to see your cash flow problems? Is there anything you would add?
I had thoughts as well on partnerships with other businesses. This is especially relevant if you're in the B2C style industries. There may well be B2B partnerships that you just haven't thought to explore, and making those connections ahead of time so you have these potential partnerships at all times. I've seen that work for people time and time again, that they've had a bit of slack in the system and they've been able to go down a B2B line and just plug a gap, and it has turned out to be a very successful long-term addition to what they offered.
Yeah, I think back to when my business was really small and I did worry month to month about cash flow. that saving case, that new client that sort of saved my bacon, I could always pinpoint it back to that one little effort of a networking event that I went to, but perhaps didn't want to go, or listening to something that I wasn't going to go to and learning something new. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
So next up, people have been asking about the budget implications on VAT thresholds. Now, obviously, in April, the VAT threshold rose from 85,000 to 90,000, having sat at 85 for quite some time. There was nothing in particular in the budget. However, I would say with inflationary costs and other changes coming through, it is more important than ever to make sure you're keeping an eye on your figures, because you must register for VAT if you're going to exceed the threshold within the next 30 days, not once you've realised that you've crossed it. So really, it's just a reminder to be very proactive there and make sure you know your figures. Okay, and then you were also asking about regional funding disparities. And certainly I have lived in the south coast of England, and now I live in the north coast of Northern Ireland. So I have seen firsthand how regional disparities do play out. Again, there's nothing specific that's been announced at this stage. However, we do know that it is a high priority for the government. They're making all the right noises. They're promising, public sector funding. They're promising an equalisation. But realistically, it's just going to be a case of waiting and seeing. I do expect there to be some localised boosts popping up. But these things always take time to actually happen. We were also asked about business mileage allowances for sole traders. Again, this is a nice simple one. There are no direct changes. They've said that this is going to hold for next tax year, so it will be the year after if anything does change. But you were also asking about R&D tax credits and how these can benefit your small business, and that is a very interesting area. I have worked with a lot of people over the last few years who honestly haven't realised the level of R&D tax credits that are available. And even if they do, they've not twigged that what you're doing in your small business is actually R&D. It's very easy to see when you've got a multi-million-pound business and you've got a whole R&D team, then that's nice and noticeable. But I can almost guarantee you will be doing some degree of R&D, and you may qualify for the tax relief. Now, there's no specific changes. It is holding at current levels, but that is actually incredibly generous. There are a lot of options out there. However, you will want to talk that through with an accountant or a specialist in that field, because it is tricky to navigate, but it is worth doing. Now, there's specific funding has come out for those in growth potential industries. These are carbon capture, the automotive sector, aerospace, and life sciences. Again, they don't tend to lend themselves to the smaller business, but I have known some smaller life sciences businesses that have successfully applied for the R&D tax credit, so it really is worth exploring. Do you have anything to add on that one, Lisa? I don't know if you've come across
No, I think I'm in the category of, as a small business, I wouldn't have thought I would qualify, but maybe that should be on my list, to go and find out if there's anything that we do. I mean, we do a lot of research, but I don't know whether it would class or not. So I'm going to ask my accountant.
Always worth a try, you never know.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Okay, so obviously everyone is trying to be as strategic as possible, and we've been asked about how you can better streamline your financial planning. Obviously, top of the list, go and see a fantastic financial planner or an accountant. But honestly, being prepared and knowing what you're dealing with is the key to success here. We have this continued push towards making tax digital. It keeps being pushed down the road, but it is gradually happening. So it makes sense for every small business to be really getting to grips with their accounting software and making sure they're using it to its fullest capabilities. Obviously, you have paid apps like Xero and QuickBooks, and they really have fantastic forecasting and reporting built in. But even if you don't have the budget for a paid option like that, there are actually some really good free options out there. I use Bullet for my sole tradership, which is only UK and Ireland, but it is very good. And there's even a limited companies option called Quickfile, which is 100% MTD approved. And I was a bit stunned that there are free options out there that are MTD approved. So I'm not sure those are getting enough of a push. Now, these free options won't give you as much of an in-depth forecasting as the paid tools, but I would say that being able to look back and see where you've come from is half of the battle. That can help you extrapolate out to what to expect so much. So really, I think everyone just needs to make sure that everything is getting into their accounting software and that you schedule some time in to actually look at the figures. You can integrate your accounting software with so many other tools. If you use something like Zapier, which basically takes two apps and sticks them together. So you can move information from an Excel sheet into your accounting software or from one system to another. So it will automatically pull everything into one place so you can just sit down and do a proper review. We were asked about striking the balance between investing growth and maintaining a financial safety net. People are understandably feeling nervous about reinvesting when everything looks so uncertain. Lisa, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I always remember that Warren Buffett phrase, is it be fearful when everyone's greedy and greedy when everyone's fearful. So we do actually have to be brave at these times where we do feel where it's nervous. Maybe it's a time when we could get an edge on our competitors when they're not choosing to be brave. But I don't think brave necessarily, well, it definitely doesn't mean uninformed. So I think it's really important to sit down with your accountant or business coach and really just think about what you're trying to achieve as a business over the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year plan that we talked about last week. And my 7-year plan, for example, just feels way over the top. It feels like I could actually not quite achieve it. So what I'm trying to do is break those down into mini micro goals. And it's, for me at least, it's about looking at those mini micro goals and seeing what money do I need to try to catapult me that little bit further. And so I sit down often with my business coach to help me just understand what's, I suppose, what's sensible, what's affordable, but also what do I have capacity for? Because my actual own worst enemy is me. I want to say yes to everything, and I want to say yes to everything, which if I let it would mean I'll be working 24 hours a day. And as much as I love my job, I do know that I need to take a break. So those would be my tips, really planning it well and not getting distracted by all the new shiny things that are out there.
Yes, and I think that's a great point as well. As much as you can see the opportunity of a particular investment, do you have the time and resources to make good use of it right now? I mean, we're in the midst of Black Friday shopping season, and I'm sure loads of us have, made a faux pas in the purchasing over the last few years. You see something, it's a great deal, you want it, and then it sits in a cupboard because you don't actually have time to explore it for a couple of years. And when times are that bit tighter, purchasing something that you're not going to be able to immediately use is money that would probably be better sitting in the bank account for when things do free up. So yeah, I mean, I entirely agree. I mean, right now, I'm not brave. Lisa is obviously the brave one of the two of us. I would look for what is pivotal to keep your business viable against your competitors. But personally, I would feel that waiting till things are just that bit more stable would be preferable. So I personally would stave off on bigger investments. But I do like this idea of, if you have this money pot allocated for growth, then you can spend that and know that you're still going to be keeping your figures in line. So that does seem a cost managing method of investing. And this one, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say a practical step that I tried to take between sort of the sanity and maybe the ego side of me for the business is I set aside my profit in a separate account, and it's with that money, obviously I could be choosing to take that to pay it to myself, or it's that part of the money that I'm thinking about, can I use this to make more profit in the future? So I think it's about distinguishing between your cash flow and the lump sums that you've got for investment as well, and having a really clear distinction so that your future growth isn't funded out of your cash flow and then you get in all sorts of bother.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're going to touch on later how you should pay yourself a stable wage, but having a certain amount put aside each month, as you would for a holiday or whatever in your personal life, you know, having a sort of expansion and growth fund, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, in my business, I would have that for training each year. I would have a set amount, and that's what I can invest in training. So moving on, we were asked if you should adjust your pricing strategy in response to inflation. And this is such a tricky one, and really does affect every business differently. And you will know yourself where, oh, yes, sorry, I just saw that in the chat, Jane, that she puts the money for her taxes in a separate account. Yes, I do the same. It goes straight as a standing order, so that way you can just forget about it and it's there when you want it. So yes, inflation is every business owner's nightmare at the moment, whether you're in services or products, B2B or B2C. It is just such a nightmare. And I know so many business owners are stuck where they feel that they need to raise their prices in order to stay afloat, yet at the same time they know that their customers can't cope with the price changes very easily. So what do? Do you stay the same? Do you raise them? Do you lower them? And I would say categorically don't lower them, please. You know what you're worth and you set that price for a reason. I can't imagine you set that price with so much wiggle room that you can afford to take that price down and not be personally hurting from it. And if you do lower your prices, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get out of. A lot of people genuinely have to raise their prices right now, and it's difficult, especially if you're working internationally, because maybe they don't have the same inflationary issues as the UK right now, and they may not be as understanding. But I would say, if you need to raise your prices, do it transparently. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has received emails from people saying, we don't want to put our prices up, but these are the costs we are now enduring. And unfortunately, that means we need to go up 5% in order to remain viable. And if you need to do that, that sort of email, that upfront we're not doing this out of greed, we're doing this because we need to survive, will help it go over more successfully. I think people need to know that the quality of whatever it is you're offering isn't dropping. And you can pitch that as part of your price increase and say that you're doing this because you're committed to your current standard and you will not reduce your customer service. This is now a requirement. So you're going to know yourself. If you're struggling, if you cannot be, if your sales are the same and you are struggling, then you need to be looking at rising your prices, but you need to do so in a way that is going to be honest and open, because people will appreciate that more than just a sneaky price rise on the back end. Have you got anything to add on that one, Lisa?
Well, we just had a question from Emily, who runs an indoor climbing centre, and so her fixed costs are the same whether she's got 10 through the door or 100 through the door. She's saying, what are our thoughts for a service business? Obviously I'm a service business, but not as fun as an indoor climbing centre. But I think something that I'm going to be trialling in the new year is different price levels. For us, it'll be for different levels of expertise. So as you would in a hairdresser's, for example, that's what I'm going to be trying. But there's quite a lot at the moment about dynamic pricing. So I don't know whether you're already doing dynamic pricing, but I know there's a golf simulator place locally to me, and they have different prices for different times of the day, depending when they're busy or when they're quiet. So I don't know if that's an idea that you've already considered, but those are probably the two that I can think of.
Yes, absolutely. And even in some cases, if there are certain times a day that you just aren't getting people, you can consider closing for that time of day. If you're spending out on staff costs and lighting and heating, although you can't get back the fixed costs, you can still reduce it if you need to. And certainly a lot of places during the winter, especially if you are closing on quiet mornings, that can actually be a significant saving. And again, I would say, back to what I was saying earlier, there's potential there for partnerships. You can look at corporate ideas there. Certainly there's a local climbing wall to me, and they do closed events for the corporate circle, and that is a wholly different price point to the usual public crowd. So that might be something to explore.
Should we go into the growth and strategy section of the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the question in this section was, what's the best way for small businesses like mine to secure funding? And I think it's obviously sector by sector, business by business, but I know that in my industry, it's about starting early to make sure you can demonstrate you've got a really well-run business. So there's no sort of skeletons in the closet that make people nervous about. And in my industry, there are actually companies that will guide you through that process, whether it's a business coach or whether it's an actual, I suppose, venture capitalist trust or something like that that wants to put you through it. But for us, it's about getting all your paperwork in order, everything to be squeaky clean, perfect processes, perfect policies. But yeah, that's just in my industry. I don't know if you've come across it, Zoe, how to organise yourself to secure funding.
To be honest, it's back to just good, what I'm going to call financial hygiene, isn't it? It's having all the data at your fingertips and understanding it to a degree that you can approach people with confidence in your business. That's not to say that it's all rose-tinted glasses, but if you can go in saying, this is what's working, this is the shortfall, and this is what I need to make this happen, people really do react to that level of clarity. And I think in difficult times financially, it's human nature to want to not look at the figures. And yet it's only through doing that that you can get yourself out of hole. So don't be scared of it. And if you're not confident in your figures, do go speak to an expert, because they will be able to help you make sense of it.
The next question has come in from somebody brave in today's economic climate, saying, as I look to scale my business, what financial steps should I be taking? So for me, I think it's about making sure you've got a really good team around you. So have you got an accountant that really understands you? If you're using a financial advisor, are they giving you the numbers that you need to know what you need to be doing to drive that business towards your personal goals? I've mentioned it before, but I do believe in this 1-3-5-7 year business plan, where the sort of more longer term goals do feel slightly outrageous, so that you can be mapping them into those micro goals. Obviously about really understanding your cash flow and the differences between the months and the times of the year that can fluctuate. It's about having good cash buffer, because usually as you scale business, you've got to front load that with costs at the beginning. So whether that's equipment or whether that's training up the right people so that you can deal with the capacity at the time when you scale, I think is important. Those are the things that stuck out to me.
Absolutely, and I think that feeds back into our funding as well, that if you do have a robust plan, then you are well placed to go and secure funding. If you can go and show your lofty goals for the 7 years, not only is that very motivational for you and your team as well, but it also shows funders that you are serious. This isn't something that you're giving a go at for a few years and maybe you'll go back to being employed. Which does seem to be a concern that some people have at the moment. So I think just showing, no, you're serious, you want to grow your business, and getting everything in place. I mean, I think you mentioned getting a solicitor to help with the legal consequences. And I have to say that's fantastic. Again, you want to be proactive there. You don't want to be turning up and saying, we've scaled, we've done that, is it okay? You want to go in ahead of time and have a clear eye to the future. The next question we were asked was about the cost implications of introducing flexible working arrangements post-budget. Now, this one has got a lot of people a little bit scared, and I know, Lisa, you covered it a bit last week in the webinar. Flexible working isn't just working from home. Flexible working can be working from home or hybrid, or it can be flexible hours. So maybe this is people who work term time, maybe they work slightly different hours to the rest of the team, but they're there during core hours. But the point remains that whilst anyone can now request flexible working, you can say no if you have a valid reason for it. And I know last week we were giving the examples of, for instance, if your business is a factory, no, somebody cannot work from home. But for a lot of small businesses, there is the reality that maybe it's not financially viable, and that could be a valid constraint if you have a lot of expenses that would need to be done in order to allow someone to work flexibly in whatever capacity they want. There are definitely upsides to flexible working, especially if you have people on your team who are parents or carers of some degree, but you will also need to look at the costs. Depending on your current setup, maybe you already have laptops and everyone has licensed software on their laptop, but maybe you don't. And if somebody's going to work on a different system, is that new licenses? Is that new hardware? Even elements like insurance. Certainly, I started my career as an accountant, and when I asked to work from home, the liability of having client data outside of the business meant that the insurance costs would go up. So make sure that you're considering all the potential costs before you approve flexible working. And if it's not manageable and you can show that that's not viable financially, then that is a valid reason to not allow flexible working.
We just had a question in on the Q&A. I think the answer might be we don't know, but does a client contract stating working hours they want people available for seem reasonable? I think from my point of view, I definitely don't know the answer to that question, but I've always had a great HR lady that I pre-buy hours for, that I would just ping that question over to, just to be, well, check with the rules. But do you know, would you have any idea of the answer?
I don't know off the top of my head either. No, I mean, I know HR can get very technical very quickly.
Yeah.
So yes, I haven't. I would recommend passing that on to an HR advisor.
Perfect.
So we were asked if there's any specific incentives for hiring apprentices. Obviously, there's a big push on apprenticeships at the moment, and we are looking at a future where our young people will have to either stay in education or be in an apprenticeship now. Now, Skills England was set up in July of this year, and they are now handling all the apprenticeship administration. The good news is that prior to this government, apprenticeships had to be 12 plus months, but you can now go for shorter apprenticeships as well. There was nothing new announced in the budget, but I want to just run through what there is available, because I feel like a lot of people haven't been made aware. So you can apply for Class 1 NIC relief if you have an apprentice under the age of 25, and that can be quite sizable. But the government will also pay 95% of training costs for most small businesses. There are some exceptions where you could get full funding for the training of your apprentice. And then furthermore, if you have an apprentice that is 16 to 18 when they start, or 19 to 24, but they have been in care or they have a health need, you could get £1,000 to set them up in your business when they first come on board. So there actually are some very good things out there. And I do feel like apprenticeships are going to become more of the norm. So if it is something that you think your business could benefit from, it's definitely worth checking out the Skills England page and making sure you're up to date on what you could get. Anything to add on that one, Lisa?
No, but I think with rising university costs, I think people are more open to the idea of being an apprentice rather than going to university.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We were asked, are there any updates to data protection laws that could affect my operations? Now, obviously, GDPR was a nightmare for so many, and we've just got used to that, and now something is coming down the pipeline. But before we all start panicking, it is supposed to simplify things. Fingers crossed. The Data Use and Access Bill is a long way from becoming law. It has just started being debated in the House of Lords, but it is meant to ease the need for quite so much consent as we have now. If it does pass in its current form, for example, you wouldn't need to get consent for analytic cookies on your website. Certainly, we've all been driven nuts in recent years with the cookie forms before you look at anything. But there does seem like there will be some additional obligations that you will need to incorporate as well. Now, as I say, it's a long way from becoming law, so I'm sure there will be amendments to the bill before it gets to that stage. And I'm sure Small Business Britain and plenty of other people out there will make it all very clear for you ahead of time what we will need to do about that.
So next we was moving on to the personal and business finance questions. So the first one was, how can I better separate my personal and business finances? And I think this is such an important one, because often if we're having a turbulent time at work and our personal finances are intrinsically linked, we're then also having the same roller coaster with our personal finances. So it's brilliant if we can separate them. But also, I think this is also a key reason why so many small business owners or self-employed aren't paying into a pension, but even those that are paying into a pension aren't sufficiently paying into a pension. So I think you've got to get into the habit of paying yourself a monthly fixed salary, or well, income, however your accountant suggests you do that. And the way that you do that is by building up cash reserves and a cash buffer within the business, which I know is really hard at the beginning. I remember when it felt like I could only dream that that would be possible for me. But yeah, building up that cash buffer can then create that separation between the business having a bad month, but still being able to pay you personally. I think it's also about building up your personal cash reserves where you can as well, because then you could maybe decide you're just going to keep doing the things that you're doing personally, but only take half the amount, let's say, in a notoriously quiet month. And then what I love doing with clients is setting them, looking at their personal financial situation, creating them this, what life is it that they want to live? What is life going to cost them in retirement, let's say? What are their goals in the medium term that we're aiming for? And then what do we have to do every month or year to achieve those goals? And then that goal can then go into the business plan. And so it's about making the business plan and the business goals around the income that you need personally to make your perfect financial plan come true, which is hard to achieve, but I think having it in front of mind will make it actually easier. But also, when you're thinking about that 1, 3, 5, 7 year goals that I keep talking about, life will feel very different in 5 years as it will in 3 years, well, as it will in 7. So really having the time to think about what will change during your life so that you can start planning in the business is important, because maybe it's not about just going for growth. Maybe it is about thinking, well, in 3 years' time, my eldest will be in the thick of it with all their exams and I want to work a little bit less or to be there for them. Or in 7 years, they'll all be off at uni, so I'll have more time. So I think it's about putting your business plan on top of your personal goals as well. And then the practical tips of just actually separating it is having business accounts for your bank accounts for your business, and then having completely separate set of accounts for you personally, so that you're transferring on a regular basis money from your business into your personal. And then ideally, if you wanted to be extra keen, the day that you pay yourself is then also the day, just like you would with Profit First method, but on your personal finances, you pay into your ISAs, your savings, your mortgage, all of those things happens the day that you get paid. So whatever you're left with is the money that then you can spend without feeling guilty that you haven't done what you should do. The personal finance things that are usually not pulled out of the business would be your pension payments. Usually the accountants would always say the pension comes out of the company. You can set up things like insurances through the company. So say you've got some life insurance, you can set it up as what's called a relevant life contract. And that's just an extra form. It's a trust form that you fill out, which means the company can pay for it and therefore be an expense, but your loved ones can benefit from it should you die. And then there's all sorts of things like income protection. If you do critical illness though through your company, you just have to be careful, because often the contracts that are have been set up to be allowed to go through a business often aren't as comprehensive. So you just have to be careful of the small print if you do a critical illness contract through the business.
Yes, I mean, sorry, jumping in there, but just to very much agree with you on that. We in my house we have 3 household budgets because my husband is also self-employed. So we have the budget for scraping by, and we have the budget for we're quite comfortable, and we have the one day we would love to be here budget, and that very much dictates how much we're taking from the business as our wage. You know, when times are hard in the business, yes, maybe you have to drop down to that scraping by budget, but you have those figures, so you know, no, I can get by on this, and hopefully you're not there for very long. And then there's that midpoint where we survive quite comfortably, and that dictates how much comes out of the business. But it also means this top tier gives us something to reach for. You know, when you look at the expenses and the savings that would be in this top tier for our ideal life, then you can extrapolate that and go, well, how much more do I need to grow my business? How much more does my husband need to grow his business, that we can make this a reality, even if it's 10 years down the line? So
yeah,
yes,
I think it's a good point, and I think the motivational factor is a really good point. It's good to know. Well, I suppose it's a reward in the good months. We actually 3 months out of 12 this year, we achieved our ideal goal, and then that's something you can measure yourself against as well, isn't it?
And don't be afraid to pay yourself a bonus if you're setting yourself a salary. Well, you know, a wage amount of a certain amount that is viable throughout the year, and you get to the end of the year and you discover no business is in a much better place. The likes of Christmas bonuses can exist for you too. So, you know, don't be afraid to go, oh, okay, I can afford to take that extra bit out of the business without it harming things. Even if you can't build that into the monthly amount, it's nice to get a bonus.
Yeah, who doesn't like a bonus? And somebody has just asked, what companies would you recommend for starting a very modest pension for a small business with 2 employees, 1 director, 1 part-time? So on these sessions, because that would be classed as advice, we couldn't mention any actual providers, but there's some great tools out there where you could do the research yourself. So for example, the Times Money Mentor has a whole pension section where you can look at all the different benefits, but essentially what you're looking for, if it's a small amount going in, you want something that's relatively cheap, and cheap could be, I don't know, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4% a year is probably classed as cheap. And then you want something that is cheap but not bad. And what I mean by that, it's got a range of funds that you can invest in, but those funds are performing well. And how you look that up is, so you take the name of the investment. Let's say you're in the name of the company Balance Fund. You would just go into a website called trustnet.com and put in the search the whatever it is, Balance Fund, and it will come up with a huge amount of information about that fund, which probably most people aren't that interested in unless you're me. But the very top of that page is going to be a graph, and on that graph will be 2 lines. One is you and one is the average. So that could be a quick acid test to see how they're performing against the average. So I think it's those things, keeping costs down, but making sure you're in something that's performing well. But most of the pension providers out there are going to have off-the-shelf portfolios. So you're not going to be having to be picking investments for yourself and suddenly become an investment expert overnight. But yeah, Times Money Mentor has some great resources. And then there's a website called Compare the Platform as well, I think, that will help you compare pension providers. And then I don't know who does your payroll, but for me, our payroll set us up a cheap and cheerful pension for people to opt in and out of if that's all they want as well. So maybe your payroll or accountant can suggest what they do. And then somebody's just asked, Zoe, what should an accountant really be bringing into a business? Are we expecting too much from them to be really proactive and wanting more than just payroll and corporation tax requirements? I think for me, it's about finding out, like, what service are you paying for and what should be expected? And therefore, what are you willing to pay for? For me, I really enjoy having the accountant at the end of the line to really support me, especially during the early days of this new business, because I don't know everything yet. Well, maybe you never know everything, but there are lots of new things that I come across that I do need their support for. But I think the main thing for me is somebody that speaks my language. I want someone who, when they speak and when they're explaining things to me, that I really understand it and I understand it clearly, so that I can then take that information and put it into my business plan. I don't know if you have different criteria, Zoe.
No, I mean, I very much agree. I have worked in a variety of different styles of accountancy firm, and I have supported people in a variety of styles of accountancy firm, and really you can now get the sort of accountant you want. I feel like the old guard are still about. You can still get those traditional, one-on-ones on the golf course type meetings, and yes, it's not just something from TV, it happens. A lot of small business owners ended up with these online accountants that are cheap as chips, but they have been struggling with that level of support. But what I would say is there are people out there. You just need to find, as Lisa said, someone that actually suits your style. Maybe you know all the accountancy terminology and you can go with someone who speaks like that. Maybe you want someone who's a bit more modern and down to earth and is going to explain things in a crystal clear way. So shop around. Don't just go with who you've always been with or somebody that's been recommended to you. Find someone that will give you the right level of support and will support you in a way that makes sense for you, because there is a variety out there now.
Yeah, I would agree. So we're coming to the last, 5-10 minutes of questions. So if anyone has anything that they want to ask, please do feel you can put it in the Q&A. We're keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. And then the next question was, what steps can I take to protect my personal financial well-being while focusing on growing my business? The things I put down for this were, think about who owns the assets. So I think what I mean by that is, if you're growing your business and taking risks and there's a risk to your business not succeeding, whose name are your assets in? So have you got them in your partner's name, your name? What assets are you actually putting at risk? I think is a good analysis to do. The other thing is to know that unless you've purposely gone out of your way to take money from your company and put it in your pension, to the detriment of your company, pensions are usually protected. So if your business doesn't go well, then the money in your pension can be protected. And next one, I think it's really like what you said, Zoe. I've put it down as managing cash flow and cash reserves pessimistically. So you're always a bit nervous, always setting that little bit more aside. So there's 3 different types of budgets that you're doing, but maybe acting positively and in a way that everything will go well, making the decisions with a positive mindset, but having your cash flow and your budgets done with a pessimism slightly can help.
Yes, absolutely. It does seem counterintuitive to, set up a business and then pay yourself as little as you can. But you can always take that bonus, and the longevity of your business is the most important driver to protect your income in the long term, even if it means there's times that your income may have to reduce to keep that flowing.
Yeah. And I suppose it doesn't have to be forever. If you're really strict and you've got a really good understanding of, in 3 months, I'm prepared to feel the pain financially. For the next 3 months after that, this is what it needs to look like. So that in your first 3 months, you're planning the cash flow for those following 3 months. So you're bringing in the deals. I suppose it depends how long your pipeline takes to come through. But yeah, I think having a month by month of what you personally will accept, and therefore what the business has to bring in, can help keep you sane as well.
Absolutely. So we were asked if any of the recent changes will affect your ability to offset business losses against personal income. And again, there was nothing concrete that would dramatically affect how you offset business losses. But with so many little tweaks across the financial system, really it is again a case of keeping an eye on your figures and speaking to an accountant or financial advisor who will be able to tell you if anything needs to change here. But there was nothing substantial that would automatically change things for you.
We've got a couple of questions that have come in. Shall I try and squeeze them in quickly?
Yeah.
So maybe someone anonymously is asking, can we talk frankly about monthly accountancy fees for small businesses? It's a minefield with such a huge variety in costs. And what are people's experiences with paying? I think for me as a small business, my accountancy fees tend to be between the £2,000 to £3,000 a year mark. But I don't know if people want to help with that question. They could put in what they're paying, or if they feel comfortable to share their fees. Do you have an opinion on that, Zoe? Have you got a rough ballpark?
To be honest, around that 2,000 mark does seem to be fairly standard if you want a robust level of support. There certainly are more affordable options out there if you're happy to be a bit more hands off with it. But if you want that robust tailored support, then realistically you're probably going to be looking at 2,000 upwards, depending on your business.
And some people have been very kind by saying exactly what they pay as well. So ranging from £12 to £150. I don't know if that's a month or what, but there's lots in the chat really to see if you want a bit of a benchmark. And then lastly, we've got what are the job responsibilities of a financial controller, and what are the things to look out for in a business to when you hire one? Would you know that answer? I wouldn't.
I wouldn't. Again, that feels like it's veered a bit into the HR sphere. So no, I would not like to hazard a guess on that one.
And then the last one was, I employ individuals with chronic illnesses. What would a chronic illness contract help me to get? So the one I was referring to was a critical illness. Chronic illnesses are often quite hard to claim for. But if the gentleman who asked this question, if you want me to introduce you to an insurance expert, I can pass on your details to them, and they'll be able to tell you much more than I could about what cover you can get.
Okay, well, we are at 5:02, so
yes,
we should probably hand back over. Oh, here she is.
Here I am. Oh, thank you so much for that brilliant Q&A, Lisa and Zoe. I thought that was fantastic. I was learning a lot as well, just listening in.
Oh, good. Well, I learned lots too from you, Zoe, so thank you.
Yes, likewise.
That was brilliant, and I can see that everyone in the chat as well was getting a lot out of it. I'm just going to pop another couple of slides up just so we can see these at the end. I've just popped these up because, as we know, this wonderful webinar has been supported by the Lloyds Bank Academy. So there's a couple of QR codes there if you want to take a look at what Lloyds Bank Academy offer to small businesses. There are some fantastic opportunities on there, so please do take a look. Thank you so much, Lisa and Zoe. As always, fantastic webinar from you guys, and thank you so much for coming, everyone. I'm just going to skip to the next page as well. 5 more seconds to have a look at these QR codes, but we will send them to you afterwards as well. And then I'll pop this as well. I would love to get your webinar feedback as well on this as well, because that helps us improve. This, of course, has been recorded, as I said at the beginning, and all of those of you who turned up today get 2 hours of free mentoring. So thank you so much for coming. Keep an eye out for that link. Please do make the most of that opportunity. It's a really wonderful opportunity to ask further questions. Maybe there's some other things that you thought of today that you wanted to ask related to slightly different topics. You can do all of that in your mentoring session. So please do make the most of that. Thanks for coming, everyone. Unless you guys want to add anything else before we head off, we can end.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant.
Yeah, loved it. See you all.
So much, guys. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.